All right, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are joining us from. My name is Ryan O'Donnell, Senior Strategist with the International Trademark Association, and thank you for joining us today for our webcast entitled Follow the Leader, How to Lead by Following. We're going to have a fun presentation for you today within the next hour, and we welcome some interactive chats or questions, and I'll walk through exactly how we're going to do that once we introduce our speakers in the program. Again, all of our participants are going to be on mute for the duration of the webcast for efficiency of the presentation, but I will walk you through in just a moment how we can submit some questions or comments. So again, thank you for joining us. Follow the Leader, How to Lead by Following is presented by INTA's Leadership Development Committee and their Leadership Online Subcommittee. So thank you to that team. Joe Kukla and Laura Ganoza-Folia and all of their hard work and the team putting this together. As I mentioned, you may use the chat feature in this web meeting to submit questions at any time, or you can email them to me directly at rodonnell@inta.org. We will address as many questions, if not all, at the end of the webcast, so feel free to submit them as you please, and we'll save some time at the end. We've also, on every slide, included the details reminding you to chat or email to my address there should you forget, so you're welcome to send us a note at any time. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce our co-moderators for today for Follow the Leader, How to Lead by Following. First, we have Jonathan Clegg from Cleveland Scott York of the United Kingdom. Jonathan is representing INTA's Leadership Development Committee. Joining Jonathan, we have Virginia Ginger Smith from Exxon Mobil Corporation in the United States, and Ginger is representing the Impact Studies Committee. So without further ado, Jonathan and Ginger, please take it away.
Well, thanks very much, Ryan, and a very good morning or good afternoon to everyone, wherever you happen to be listening to this from. So the concept of leadership is one which has had a lot of press, a huge amount of research and study into it, loads of books and articles and discussion about leadership, what makes a good leader, what makes a bad leader, who are our favorite leaders, which leaders have been the most effective agents of change, and what are the different styles of leadership, and so on. Followership, which is what we're focusing on today, has less written about it and less spoken about it, a lot less in fact. And actually, in preparing for this, we felt that there's something of a stigma we need to get over when it comes to being a follower, of which more in a moment. But in terms of what we're planning to do in this session, we're going to look at what effective followership means and how it's inextricably linked to leadership. And we plan to do this by, first of all, looking at some different types of follower, some stereotypes, if you like. We also want to cover the question of cultural considerations, because we think these can come into play quite a bit in the relationship between followers and leaders. We're then going to look at some hypothetical scenarios from a follower's point of view, and we're going to ask you to participate in a live poll on each one to see how you would tackle the hypothetical situations we put to you by choosing one of two or three outcomes or solutions to the situation. So what comes to mind when we think about followers? We might think of a sheep blindly following its friends. We might think of a stereotypical yes man or yes woman, or maybe we think of someone who relies on others to do their original thinking. These are traits of followers that we're going to have a closer look at in a moment. But first, here are some of the terms out there which are sometimes used to describe followers. I think you'll agree that the connotations on this slide around the attractive little picture in the middle are not particularly positive. We've chosen words here with more negative connotations to underline the point that followership is not always regarded positively. I grant you that words like flunky, lackey, and stooge are maybe not exactly everyday words that we use all the time, but you get the picture.
So as Jonathan said, one of our primary goals for this webcast is to dispel the idea that followership is a negative or somehow less important than leadership. Each role influences and depends upon the other. Effective followership is an essential component to the success of all organizations and is every bit as important as effective leadership. We'd like to share with you some quotations that illustrate the importance of effective followership and the interdependent relationship between leadership and followership. So this first quote is true. If the leader is only interested in his own glory, he won't inspire or motivate followers to contribute. Pardon me. This second quote, and we have a video coming up in a moment that perfectly illustrates this concept. Often we're playing the roles of leader and follower at the same time. Being an effective follower is also leading by example, and a good leader knows when to step back and let someone else shine or listen to other opinions. The next slide, please. Thanks. Followers are more important to leaders than leaders are to followers. Without effective followers, the leader cannot accomplish much. And I love this one by Leonard Bernstein because I love music. The most difficult instrument to play is the second fiddle. As we'll see later in the webcast, effective followership requires good judgment in many different aspects. The third quote, again, the leader and the group are nothing without effective followers. And the last one is another example of playing both roles at the same time.
So in a moment, we're going to dig a little deeper into some of the more negative follower stereotypes. But before we do that, we'd like you to take a look at an extract from a TED Talk, a video clip, which explores the importance of followership on the followership leadership dynamic. And it's quite humorous in some ways, but it's also got some great points in it. It's called Dancing Guy. Can we roll the clip?
If you've learned a lot about leadership and making a movement, then let's watch a movement happen start to finish in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons. First, of course, a leader needs the guts to stand alone and look ridiculous. But what he's doing is so simple, it's almost instructional. This is key. You must be easy to follow. Now here comes the first follower with a crucial role. He publicly shows everyone else how to follow. Notice how the leader embraces him as an equal. So it's not about the leader anymore, it's about them, plural. Notice how he's calling to his friends to join in. So it takes guts to be a first follower. You stand out and you brave ridicule yourself. Being a first follower is an underappreciated form of leadership. The first follower transforms a lone nut into a leader. If the leader is the flint, the first follower is the spark that really makes the fire. Now here's the second follower. This is a turning point. It's proof the first has done well. Now it's not a lone nut and it's not two nuts. 3 is a crowd and a crowd is news. A movement must be public. Make sure outsiders see more than just the leader. Everyone needs to see the followers because new followers emulate followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, then 3 more immediately. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point, and now we have a movement. As more people jump in, it's no longer risky. If they were on the fence before, there's no reason not to join in now. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, and they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. And over the next minute, you'll see the rest who prefer to stay part of the crowd, because eventually they'd be ridiculed for not joining. And ladies and gentlemen, that is how a movement is made. So let's recap what we've learned. If you are a version of the shirtless dancing guy, all alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals, making everything clearly about the movement, not you. Be public, be easy to follow. But the biggest lesson here, did you catch it? Leadership is overglorified. Yes, it started with the shirtless guy, and he'll get all the credit, but you saw what really happened. It was the first follower that transformed a lone nut into a leader. There's no movement without the first follower. See, we're told that we all need to be leaders, but that would be really ineffective. The best way to make a movement, if you really care, is to courageously follow and show others how to follow. When you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first person to stand up and join in.
Well, I think that's such a great clip. It's a fun way to see a few good aspects of both followership and leadership, quite apart from the excellent dancing, the excellent and uninhibited dancing that we saw. The fact that there's no leader and no movement without the first follower, when you think about it, is quite an obvious point, but it's not one I'd particularly thought of explicitly. And also the fact that as more followers join the dancing guy, the risk that spectators feel about joining in decreases until it's more risky not to join in. That's quite an interesting take on being the first follower and the risk that one might feel in that. And then again, also the momentum really picks up once there are a handful of effective followers. And what I mean by effective followers in that context are followers that are fully signed up and ready to welcome new team members in. So anyway, with that clip in mind, let's move on to look at some different follower types. We thought this was just quite a nice, simple way of characterizing what we think the main types of follower are. If you look at the left-hand side of the chart, the two quadrants, that points more to passive followers, passivity on the left, and active followers on the right-hand side. And the top of the chart points to the criteria of independence and critical thinking, and the bottom to dependence and uncritical thinking. So if we take the two axes into account, it seems clear that effective followers are both active in that they get stuck in and get things done, but also that they exhibit independence and the ability to think critically. And importantly as well, to be able to communicate this critical thought in an appropriate way to the leader. All three of the other categories, aside from the effective follower, exhibit important shortcomings. And what we thought we'd do next is to look at each of these stereotypes, if you like, separately, starting with the sheep.
The sheep, as Jonathan said, is passive, dependent, and not a critical thinker. This little cartoon defines the sheep as a person regarded as timid, weak, or one who is easily swayed or led. Listed here are some characteristics of the sheep. They contribute little to the group, and this can be due to apathy, to lack of confidence in their own abilities, or even failure by the leader to inspire or to encourage participation. From time to time, I've encountered the sheep at INTA. I imagine some of you have too. This is the type of person who joins a committee solely for the benefits it offers, such as attendance at the leadership meeting or to beef up their bio. This person may not attend meetings or calls, or if they do, they contribute the bare minimum. And another motivator for some sheep may be that they are simply resistant to change of any kind. And this is the person who says, that's just the way we've always done things around here.
The lack of dissent is a major characteristic of this kind of follower. This follower probably doesn't appreciate that a different view can be expressed in a positive and collaborative way, and it doesn't need to be, the fact that it's dissenting doesn't need to make it negative or threatening. And there are also some inconsistencies in how this kind of follower thinks about the team they're in. Although they rarely make positive suggestions, they may justify this to themselves by saying that basically things can't or needn't be improved. And that's a kind of neat way of then sidestepping the need to step in and make a positive suggestion. Sometimes they go with the status quo, and it's a variation on the same point. They adopt a passive approach, but they might justify that to themselves by saying to themselves that they're doing the leader a favor by not rocking the boat. Again, they're underestimating the potentially high value they'd bring to a team by not defaulting to accepting how things are. What may be going on, sort of on a more psychological level, is that they may need to be empowered or given some confidence by the team leader to step out in this area and to actually, grasp the nettle and say things that maybe go against what's been said so far. And I guess that particular dynamic is reading that and responding to that is an important aspect of the leader's role. So let's move on to our next follower type, Ginger.
The next type of follower is the yes man, and we've all encountered this person before. In this cartoon, the personnel manager has clearly telegraphed the answer he expects to receive, contradicting the literal meaning of what he says. I hate a yes man, don't you? Of course. Yes people are low critical thinkers like the sheep, but they are much more active. They're willing to do whatever is asked and will often go above and beyond expectations in terms of the amount of work they do. But they don't question why or why not, and may even give the response they believe is expected, regardless of their own opinions. There are a number of possible motivations of the yes person. They may not realize the value of their own insights and opinions. They don't trust their own ability to contribute, and again, that's shared with the sheep. And they may not feel safe to disagree. They fear repercussions such as looking stupid, making a mistake, or even more serious ones such as demotion or termination. And this could be the fault of the leader. The yes man may simply wish to avoid confrontation, or they may genuinely believe that being agreeable is the best way to be a team player. Or they may be looking out only for themselves, motivated primarily by self-interest and self-promotion. Whatever their motivation, they won't initiate radical or risky ideas that would make them stand out in what they think would be the wrong way. And on to the third type, Jonathan.
Yeah, so this is an interesting type of follower, which we've labeled alienated. Sometimes this type of follower might be called a dissenting follower. And they normally present quite differently from the other two that we've talked about, which, as Ginger was saying, have some similarities. I think this could stem from the fact that they often have energy, but the problem is they're in a negative place about the project that the team's focusing on. And so this results in them effectively directing their energy in a rather counterproductive way in terms of what the team's trying to do. So that could come out in various ways. They might be very vocal in an antagonistic way to the leader, or alternatively they might be quite passive or even maybe a bit sulky and non-participative, which can come over as, I guess, as passive-aggressive. But in any event, it can be tricky for a leader to handle this kind of a follower because of the clear negativity that's present. At the same time, it strikes me that an objector to a project, if they can potentially provide some potential to the leader, if they can kind of turn them round and use the kind of negativity that they've had turn it into positivity and actually turn them into a follower who then contributes quite effectively to the team. Effectively, that turns them into an active supporter rather than objector. But I think the starting point for this type of alienated or dissenting follower is that they tend to be the most disruptive kind to a team.
And whichever ineffective follower a team is dealing with, they can cause a lot of problems. In all cases, diversity of opinion leads to better decisions and results, and a team of conformists directly suppresses any new or dissenting ideas. Ineffective followers can lead to oversight, even unethical or illegal behavior. In the dynamics of a group, failure to take responsibility leads to blame, which leads to dissension within the group. And on an individual level, being a poor follower may inhibit a person's progress in their career or within their organization. The characteristics of effective followers, on the other hand, directly lead to better decisions and results. Effective followers don't just wait for instructions. Simply waiting to be told what to do can give rise to a micromanager. If the manager feels the team is waiting for instructions, he or she will feel obligated to provide them. Effective followers are ready with answers and solutions. They're looking for constructive ways to advance the goals of the group. They volunteer, they're honest, they think ahead, they communicate. And last but not least, they ask questions. That old classroom adage is still true. If you have a question, probably someone else in the group has the same question.
So these are some this is some more positive terminology for followers based on kind of effective followers, and the word supporter clearly implies a follower rather than a leader, but it's a word with an entirely positive connotation, unlike some of the labels we used earlier. And companion and participant both imply a collaborative and inclusive role. They're not terms which are, loaded with status or rank. And that leads on nicely to our next visual, which shows a professional golfer with his caddy. This is quite a nice example of followership. In Henry Longhurst's words, a good caddy is these are both but a friend, which is of course not only a word that points to a reciprocal and equal relationship between two people, but it's also a personal term as well. And a guide, which actually suggests the caddy is in some respects leading the golfer. And I think that plays into this kind of axis between leadership and followership that we're hoping to draw out through this session. As for philosopher, as a non-golfer, I'm afraid the nuances of this may be slightly lost on me, but clearly the status of the caddy is elevated by the use of this word.
So now we're going to throw a caveat into the mix. The traits that we have just listed for effective followers don't necessarily apply in every situation or every culture. The military culture is quite different from the culture at a tech startup company. Japanese culture is different from American culture, and some companies are simply more formal than others. In some cultures, it may be extremely rude to look a superior in the eye or to disagree publicly, maybe even privately. The next slide shows an interesting way to look at the minefields that it's possible to find yourself in culturally. As you can see, 10% of any given culture is relatively easy for an outsider to see, and these are things like customs, bowing instead of shaking hands, mores, courtesies, things like that. But those are supported by 90% of things that are more difficult to see, the values, priorities, and assumptions that underlie the customs, mores, and courtesies. And those are what really motivate the people belonging to that culture, and it's very important to try to intuit what is going on in the culture you're dealing with. Can we move to the next slide, please? Part of being an effective leader or follower is being aware that different cultures value different behaviors and to be sensitive to cues about what's appropriate or inappropriate. Be respectful of the other culture and curious. Showing an interest is a sign of respect. So now we're going to move in and to our scenarios. And Jonathan?
Yeah, so although we've had some preliminary thoughts around effective followership, we've had also quite a bit of focus on the negative aspects of certain follower types. So how can we navigate around these stereotypes of how not to be a follower in team situations? Well, it occurs to us that real-life situations are often not clear-cut. So it's about making a judgment call as to how you react in a group or a team situation. And it may be that in considering, various ways through a situation, there might be solutions which bring in certain aspects of these different follower types and not. I mean, some will be very clear-cut, but many won't be. And it'll be a case of evaluating as a follower, and indeed this would be true of leaders as well, evaluating the best way forward, taking a number of different factors into account. So what we thought we'd do at this point is to take, we're going to look at 3 hypothetical scenarios around followership. And we're going to give you all an opportunity to vote, to do a kind of live poll on alternative suggestions of how to deal with specific situations. And we're hoping that this might, through the 3 scenarios, that we might bring out some of the slightly less clear-cut aspects of followership situations. So Ginger's going to introduce our first scenario.
So the first scenario is hypothetical about interactions on INTA committees. It's your first time serving on an INTA committee. The chair normally leads the committee call, and this time has asked you to take minutes at the next call. At the last minute, she tells you she can't make the call and asks you to take the lead. What do you do?
Okay, so we've got a binary choice here. Option A is you cancel the call. You're not the chair of the committee, and you can't therefore be expected to run the call. You signed up to taking notes, and this is not taking notes. And option B is you step in and run the call. This is your opportunity to support the leader and to help lead your team. So A, you cancel the call, and B, you step in and run the call. So now if you'll see on your screen that you can click on either cancel the call for the first option or step in and run the call on the other. And if you click on submit, we will start getting some results coming through. And this is perhaps one of the more clear-cut examples, and we can see that there's a very heavy bias in favor of option B, which is that you step in and run the call. I guess when you think about cancelling the call, this kind of has the feel to it of not wanting to step beyond exactly what the person in question, the committee member, had expected, even though that's arguably not what most of the team wanted. It's hard to say because there might be different dynamics where the leader was a particularly, had a vital role in the conversation or some special reason why they absolutely had to be there. But in many teams that won't be the case. So it may well be that most team members would have wanted to move things along even though the leader was not present. So so choosing option A is a really cautious approach. Now being cautious, of course, has its place both in followership and in leadership. It's just that it probably isn't the right approach here. Whereas running the call, on the other hand, seems to put as the top priority that it's in the team's interests for the project to move forward despite the fact that the chair isn't there. And of course, the other thing about running the call is there's an added potential benefit to the follower personally, in the sense that it's an opportunity they can choose to take. And even though they may find it slightly nerve-wracking or a little bit outside their comfort zone, it could end up being a great learning experience for them and one which they kind of look back on and are pleased they took. I
can think of a couple of situations where option A might be the right choice in certain specific circumstances, or a hybrid approach, a hybrid response, such as lead the call but defer any real active tasks that would really require the participation of the chair, as you suggested, or just to let the team know that the chair's not there, but they can discuss anything that's not a hot button issue and anything that the subject of this scenario is not comfortable with or familiar enough with to handle. So, maybe not bailing entirely, but deferring action. Most committees have a vice chair as well. So there could be situations where option A or a modified option A would certainly be the right response.
Yeah, I mean, I like that, Ginger, because I think that a kind of partial, progressing in part actually makes the team, is likely to have a good effect on the team, in the sense that, of course, there is a leader to that team, but at the same time, if it's critical for the leader to be there for anything to happen, then that's not a particularly empowering position for the rest of the team to be in. So I agree with you that there may be situations where it's a bit more nuanced, or where it needs to be partial rather than total.
Sure.
Okay, so let's go on to our second scenario, which is around interactions with superiors. So let's just paint a factual picture here. You're an in-house trademark counsel for a famous global brand. The client is launching a new global brand with involvement and interest from senior management, including, let's say, the general counsel and the director of marketing. So you, as the trademark counsel, ran a search that revealed a virtually identical registered trademark for related goods owned by a small third party. The director of marketing, who we'll say has no real trademark experience in a legal sense, makes the point that the trademarks are not exactly the same, and that because the other party is very small, it shouldn't be considered a threat. The rest of the management team, including the general counsel, who also has little direct trademark experience, agrees that there's no risk. And the dilemma for you is that it's a position you wholeheartedly disagree with, because obviously the fact that it's a small company doesn't mean it couldn't be assigned to a big company tomorrow, and the fact that it's virtually identical, makes confusion much more likely, and so on. So that's your dilemma. So the question is, what do you do?
You could say nothing, keep your thoughts to yourself. You can politely interrupt and give your opinion, or you can surreptitiously slip a note to the general counsel, which could avoid giving her, or which could give her a chance to correct herself and avoid undermining her authority. So on to the polling. Cool seeing these in live time. Okay, I think they look like they're all in. Okay, this one has some more variation. Obviously, most people thought the best thing to do was to write a note to the general counsel, but we got all three responses. I think this one largely depends on the culture of the organization that you're in. A more informal culture, in a more informal culture, it may be just fine to interrupt and to speak out. One thing that the director of marketing and the client may not be aware of in this situation is that even though the third party is very small and may not pose, doesn't have the resources to outlast you in any kind of litigation, in this age of social media, it doesn't matter how big or small they are, and that could be an influencer. In a much more formal situation, or if you're very junior, if it's a very hierarchical organization, you would want to be more sensitive to those types of roles within the group. Jonathan, do you have any thoughts about this one?
Sure. Yeah, I was just gonna. I'm interested that we have a significant majority for writing a note, but at the same time, the interrupt option is, has also a significant number of supporters, and I think that's the main issue, isn't it, between those two? And I mean, on one level, you could say, is option C, writing a note, a little bit overcomplicated, maybe trying to micromanage or overmanage the General Counsel's interactions with everybody else. But on the other hand, as you rightly say, the writing a note option is more sensitive to the situation. It's a little, on one level, it's a little bit more cautious. But in some situations, that would be entirely appropriate and the right thing to do. In terms of option B, the interrupting option, obviously the risk is that it could potentially cause offence or seem as if it's undermining the senior person. On the other hand, it's a good option in the sense that provided you speak up kind of straight away and make the interruption straight away, then you're being professionally honest as a trademark person. This is your specialism, and it's not the specialism of the senior executive present. And I mean, that's why you're in the room presumably to contribute on the trademark aspects of the situation. Now, of course, it's a little bit risky to interrupt people who you feel are much more senior than you and so on. But at the same time, I think handled well, that I could imagine situations where that's exactly the right thing to do. And the executives in the room are actually grateful for the guidance that comes out. I mean, my views. Sorry, Ginger, go on.
We're talking about interrupting. Go ahead, and then I'll.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes this question of the how cautious or bold a follower, if you like, is when facing this kind of dilemma is obviously down to a question of personal confidence, and that may be linked, for example, to how they're managed by their superiors or bosses. And in this scenario, those people could be in the room, so they may know these people very well, and so is likely to inform how they respond. I think the reality of the situation, as I think you said at the beginning of this section, Ginger, was that it really comes down to the dynamic of between the people present and their personalities. And the Trademark Council needs to read the situation in terms of the dynamics in the room. And of course, there are times when you won't be able to do that because you just don't know the people in the room well enough, and you're feeling your way as you go. And maybe in that situation, you might say that deferring to the more cautious option is the thing to do. But in other situations, where you do know the people, speaking up may also be exactly the right thing to do.
And I think the key to option B is the word. And whichever option you choose, you have to remember that at Trademark Council, it's your job to provide your advice and to protect the client's interests. And so, whatever way is the best way to do that in this particular culture, I think you have a duty to get your opinion out there.
Yeah, I think you can do worse than actually ask yourself what the main purpose of whatever the meeting or forum is that is happening, and let that be a driver in terms of which option you choose, because the question of giving offence or saying things that are regarded as inappropriate is important. But if you have a dilemma and you have a risk of that on the one hand and a risk of the key point of view being there having a negative effect because you don't say something on the other hand, then you obviously have to make a choice. And all things being equal, one could say, if it is even between the two, then going with the situation that deals with the whole point of the meeting, whatever that is, might be the better approach. But obviously, this is why we wanted to draw out the fact that these are a little bit nuanced and there isn't necessarily a categorical answer.
Well, and even with option A, there could be background facts that aren't in this hypothetical that would make option A the appropriate choice. If you and the General Counsel have already talked about it and you've already been told, that you're not going to express that opinion at the meeting, then you know, that could be absolutely the only choice you have. But yeah. Okay, the final scenario deals with interactions with clients. You are an associate at a large firm. The general counsel at a tech startup company is considering hiring your firm. You're familiar with this company, and you know their corporate culture, which is very informal as opposed to the culture at your firm. Your mentoring partner sets up a meeting with the general counsel of the company and tells you to prepare exactly the type of presentation that you know will be a big turnoff for the company. But you prepare the presentation for the partner because the partner plans to present it, and then the partner gets sick at the very last minute and asks you to lead the presentation. This presentation that you absolutely don't believe in. What do you do?
Okay, so we've got three options here. So option A is you decide to cancel the meeting. It's true that that may not please the client, but you feel you have a dilemma in the sense that you don't want to go forward with a presentation you know will not be successful. At the same time, you don't want to go against your mentor's advice. So cancel the meeting is the first option. Second option is to proceed with the PowerPoint that your mentor wants you to proceed with. And this would be on the basis that you work for a firm that is well known. There's an expectation that it will deliver a certain type of service, and that's reflected in the presentation. It's an old established firm. Your mentor partner is extremely experienced. And that when the client's presented with that, they'll open their mind, and even if it doesn't quite fit with their culture, they'll suspend that for a bit and understand the thoughtful approach that your firm's giving. So option B is to present the PowerPoint. And then option C is to adjust the presentation to fit the startup's culture. This is because you know the general counsel in the company. You understand their requirements. You know what kind of people they are. You know what will, turn them off. You know what will get their attention. And you also know that a less formal approach like this is much more likely, in your view, with your special knowledge of the people in question, much more likely to land the client at the end of it. So with that in mind, let's have our live poll. Submit our votes. Okay, so we can see already the votes are still coming in, but we have a big majority in terms of adjusting the presentation to fit the culture. That's option C. But we do have some votes for both of the other options as well, albeit at a significantly lower level. So let's look at the popular option, option C. What characterizes this option? I suppose we've talked a little bit about the sort of spectrum of caution through to boldness, and I guess that this is a bold option because the associate has some anxiety about going against what he's been specifically asked to do. But it also has an authenticity about it because the associate will be able to present in a way that he or she knows will be well received, and that will come across in the way that it's presented. There's likely to be more energy there. But on the other hand, what about the partner-associate relationship? Will the partner feel undermined? In these circumstances, is it in fact a determining factor that the partner might feel undermined? Well, the associate might say, well, it is a determining factor because it will affect me if I really annoy the partner I work for. Nonetheless, that's the most popular option. Ginger, did you want to chip in on that one?
Well, again, it depends on the corporate culture. I mean, I think it would be strange if you had not already presented to the partner your ideas about a less formal approach. And if the partner is still insisting on this presentation, then it clearly is insubordinate to, you have been vetoed, and it's insubordinate to do it. So it would depend on if you think that the reward of snagging this new client will be enough to outweigh the insubordination.
Right.
And those are just facts that have not been introduced, and we don't know. But presumably, you've already expressed your opinion to the partner and been shot down. So I think it's quite risky. You better be very, very sure of the result before doing that.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say that I think it almost that if the associate lands the client with the adjusted presentation, then you feel that the partner will be more understanding of the slight that he or she might feel as a result of what the associate's done. Whereas, perhaps the more interesting thing to think about is what would the dynamic be between the two people if the client was not landed,
right.
and the associate then had to say, well, I would then really have to say, well, because I know these people, I know that there was even less chance of winning that client if we'd adopted the traditional presentation. But you can see that would be a slightly sticky situation for the associate.
And it's possible that that more formal presentation is just so intimately connected with the firm culture that they wouldn't be a good fit anyway. I mean, not that you should not do the best for to try to sign on the client, but it could be argued that an honest approach of an honest presentation of who the firm could be the best way to proceed, and let the firm's reputation speak for itself. And maybe that associate is at the wrong firm.
I mean, it's interesting if we just talk a little bit about the cancel the meeting option, because that did get some votes.
Yeah.
And although I wasn't particularly thinking about voting for that one, I can see that you might say, you might say to a potential client, look, we really want this partner that we have in our firm to meet you. So would you be okay about moving the date?
Yeah.
I think of course, again, the dilemma comes if the potential client says, well, I don't want to engage you if you're totally dependent on one person, so show me someone else. That might present some difficulties. But what I'm saying is that there may be situations where cancelling the meeting, it certainly gives the associate no dilemma. The question is the potential client willing to wait?
Right. Right.
And then I suppose on the the thing that characterises option B, the going with a traditional PowerPoint is obvious, really, given our conversation, but it's low risk for the associate, but high risk for delivering a positive result.
So we're nearing the end of our presentation and thought we would summarize with a clip that we think illustrates many of the concepts we've discussed today.
Yeah, that's a great clip, isn't it? An extreme example of teamwork working very nicely. So as Ginger said, we're coming towards the end of our presentation, and then Ryan's going to moderate some Q&A. This slide is kind of sums up some of the points that we'd like to make at the end of this session. So first of all, in terms of followership and leadership, the relationship between the two, and the fact that we think that followership is an essential part of leadership. So from a leader's perspective, understanding the people that you have in your team is really key to strong and effective leadership. For the reasons that we've talked about, I mean, I think if you think back to some of the more negative stereotypes of followers, for example, the alienated or dissenting follower, and the fact that sometimes the negative aspects of those types may come out of a lack of empowerment, feeling a lack of empowerment to participate in a team, which then, of course, is an issue for the leader to try to tease out and to work with the follower to resolve, so that they don't feel those anxieties or insecurities. It's obviously not applicable in every situation, but I think this question of knowing the people in your team and understanding, if you like, how people process decision making and operate in a group is really important to strong leadership.
And being aware of the different types of followers that are out there, their characteristics, and especially their underlying motivations, enables leaders to better understand how to influence and inspire the team. And from the follower perspective, being aware of these traits can also create greater awareness if they can recognize these traits in themselves or in dealing with their colleagues on the team. And all that, excuse me, all that helps influence the group and to meet the goals.
Yeah, and there's clearly a strong axis between followership and leadership. And just bringing in one of the quotes we had from the beginning of the session from Eric Holderman, who said, "I can lead and I can follow. An important aspect of leadership is knowing when to do which." So as a leader, there are times when you step back within your team and allow people in the team to lead on things, and that's all part of the process of making that team work as effectively together as possible for all sorts of reasons, including the fact that it makes people feel positive and motivated about working in that group. And so many of the qualities that we look at in leaders and admire are definitely present in the best in the effective followers we've talked about. Things like motivation and wanting to collaborate and independent thinking, having the confidence to reality check the leader of the team and to have a dissenting view, but the skill and the confidence to put that view across, and maybe that will change the view of the whole team. So with all that in mind, is it any surprise that great followers often become great leaders because of that dynamic between the two? So at that point, I think we're gonna hand it over to Ryan to pick up on for the potential questions and answers.
Thank you, Jonathan. Well, first and foremost, thank you on behalf of everyone attending and the subcommittee and committee planning this. Thank you to Jonathan and Ginger for your time and allowing us to follow your lead here. Few comments came in about the great session here, so I just wanted to relay that. I do have one question here. Basically asks, what recommendations, Jonathan and Ginger, or steps should a follower take when a leader is being ineffective? If applicable, could the follower replace the leader, or how can the follower work with the leader to improve that relationship?
That's a good question. There are a number of different things. I mean, it depends in what way the leader is being ineffective. Well, I've had a situation where the leader just wasn't taking the lead. They weren't setting up calls. And it was for a specific instance I'm thinking of was for planning a session at the annual meeting on which I was a speaker. And one of the other speakers and I became concerned And we just started talking and planning amongst ourselves just so that we felt like we were getting something done, and had some semblance of a feeling of progress. And in the end, what it all boiled down to was just different styles. The other speaker and I were more planning-oriented, and the moderator was a last-minute type. And in the end, it all worked out just fine. But it did create some unnecessary stress for us. If you have a leader who is just failing to inspire, failing to include, failing to organize properly, I think anticipating what is needed by the group, what the next steps should be, what the goals are, attempting to assist the leader in bringing some organization, volunteering to take, pardon me?
I'm sorry, Ginger, I didn't mean to interrupt. Carry on.
Volunteering to take on tasks, setting up an outline or a progress chart or a calendar to set goals. Things like that can help get things moving. What were you going to say, John?
I was sorry. I was just going to ask you, Ginger, when you decided with the other speaker to go it alone, did the leader of the group know? Were you copying them in on whatever you were doing, or did you just go off and do it and then come back and say, okay, we're ready to do this?
We started emailing each other and just had a couple of calls, together, and at least kind of divvied up the topics we wanted to talk about so that we could begin preparing our comments, and then we did let the leader know that we had done that.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think if the ineffectual nature of the leader is, as you've described, is kind of just not pushing things along, then as a follower, I guess you can push the door a little bit by just offering, being proactive. I mean, one of the star follower or effective follower qualities is is effectively conscientiousness and wanting to get things moving. So, but I mean, I say push the door because, of course, you may get no response, and it's a very difficult situation if you try to remedy the situation by being proactive, helpful, offering to asking if there's anything you can do to help the leader, and then you get nothing back, because then that suggests the leader's taken offence at that, and then you've got a real problem. But I suppose there are other types of ineffectual behaviour which may just be a little temporary blockage, and the leader might be delighted if one of the followers kind of offers in a proactive way to help out on something, and that could unblock the whole thing for the whole team if it works.
Well, again, thank you very much, Jonathan and Ginger. We've reached our time here. That was the other questions that came in. We will aim to answer any other questions that might come in offline. But with that, we would like to conclude our presentation today. Again, thank you, Jonathan, Ginger, the Leadership Development Committee, for your efforts here. And we hope that many of you will join us for future leadership development webinars in the future offered by INTA. So with that, we'll let you all go. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we hope to see you again soon.